Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon if you are joining us from another part of the world. Welcome to the webinar today. We've got a lot of new faces I've seen on the participant list. So those of you who I've not had contact with, my name is Julia and I am on the commercial team at Sintali. I'm joined today by Jose Bonavento, who is our business development manager and is a very experienced edge expert. So he will be there supporting questions on the app and after the slides. We are going to be quite tight for time today. So whilst we wait for the last remaining people to come in, I'll go through some housekeeping. I've enabled the chat box and the Q&A box. If you have questions, do write them down in there. As I mentioned, we do have an opportunity for questions at the end, but any unanswered questions we will email out to you at the end of the session, but make sure that we've got a record of those questions in the chat box or in the Q&A. We will also be recording the webinar today and sending it out to all of you, as well as the slides and some more resources. So if you do need to jump off the call, that is okay. We will be sending out that information post-webinar. And whilst we wait then for the last remaining participants to join, for those of you who may not know who we are, I thought I'd give a quick introduction to Sintali. Sintali is an environmental verification company based in the UK. Within the Edge world, we are the Edge certifiers. So we don't provide Edge Expert or Edge Audit. We sit at the end of the certification process as Edge certifier. Edge certification makes up, I'd say, about 80% of what we do. And we've issued over 10,000 Edge certificates across 80 countries. And whilst we are small in size, through our collaboration with over 300 partners worldwide, from green finance institutions, banks, construction chambers, green building councils, to Edge expert consultants and auditors like yourselves, we continue to make progress in our mission, which is to decarbonize the built environment and make sustainability accessible for all. So what are our objectives today? Today, we will be exploring what are the factors to consider when preparing an Edge expert proposal. So we will be looking at understanding the role of the Edge expert. This is to ensure that you're covering all aspects of the Edge consultancy scope and thinking about each of the different parts of the Edge expert role and how these should be priced and presented in your Edge expert proposal. We will be understanding the project complexities and how this will affect your pricing. So ensuring that a project is correctly scoped in those beginning stages in order to provide the best service to your clients. And then finally, how to use your Edge expert proposal to stand out. So whilst the Edge standard is still quite young as a green building standard, we really are seeing increasing competition within Edge experts, between Edge auditors, and even us competing with Edge certifiers in the market. So we'll be taking a look at how you can use that Edge expert proposal to win deals. Some of you on the call today may be newer Edge experts looking to win your first project, and some may have had a lot of projects looking for things, sort of looking for ways to take your service to the next level. This webinar should be applicable to everyone, and the real aim here is to get you all thinking a bit deeper, looking at what the Edge expert proposal is, how you can shape your conversations with clients, and get more out of the Edge expert proposal and more out of the consultancy service. So to start then, let's take a look at what an Edge expert actually is. So the scope of work as defined by IFC within the Edge user guide is as a green design advisory service and assistance with EDGE certification. So they've written in the user guide that this could include assistance in understanding green design, assistance in understanding the EDGE software and the certification, and even a provision of informal basic training for the client on how to use the EDGE app. So at a basic level, your role is to act as a trusted guide, helping clients to understand what is required to meet the standard, and then how to get there. Let's take a look at the certification workflow. I want you to put yourself in the position of a client who has just expressed interest in certifying a project. Let's take them through the steps of the certification workflow and see where the EDGE expert, where you come into this. So as a recommended first step, looking at this bubble here, though optional, is conducting a risk assessment. This would be a simplified model built in the EDGE app using early design data. The aim here is to give the client feedback on, are they on track to meet EDGE? It's a good way to build client confidence before they commit to the certification, and also position yourself as a valuable early stage partner. So perhaps you've just had a conversation with a client about EDGE certification, that's your sales pitch. They've expressed interest in going further. This risk analysis would be a good first step before the client commits to the certification process. In some cases, developers will then require you to carry out a full gap analysis. So this is a more detailed understanding and advisory service of what a building or building design needs in order to achieve EDGE or EDGE Advanced. This is, again, an optional step and will depend on the requirement of the client. Once the client is ready then to proceed with the certification, this is where your main role really begins. As an EDGE expert, you help registering the project, collecting and modeling project data in the EDGE app, and uploading the evidence and completing the client comments. Sorry. After that, the EDGE auditor reviews the submission, conducts the site visit, and then the EDGE certifier, that's us at Sintali, reviews the work of the auditor and the EDGE expert and the client and issues the certificate where we see fit. So this slide shows you how the workload is distributed. And as you can see, EDGE experts carry the bulk of the effort, especially early on. So it's really important to think about your scope of work when pricing your services. So I want to take a look at each section of the scope of work individually. So looking then first at the gap analysis, what elements do you need to consider when pricing this and when implementing this into your proposal? So before pursuing EDGE certification, project teams have this option of the EDGE gap analysis. It's an optional pre-certification services where you help clients evaluate whether their current building or building design meets the EDGE standard, and if not, what are the changes needed to comply. So this is not just the model, this is strategic green advisory design work. So you'll be thinking about the questions, are they on track to meet the EDGE standard? What efficiency measures can the client implement to improve their building performance? And what investments would those teams need to help them reach EDGE certified or even EDGE advanced? To perform gap analysis, you'll need a range of documents. So for a few examples, architectural drawings, information on building materials, mechanical and electrical systems, plumbing specs, fuel types for heating, water, cooking, smart meters and energy systems, and renovation or construction details. We'll be sharing a more detailed list of the documentation required after the session, but knowing what to ask for upfront can help you plan and price this service effectively. So when pricing the gap analysis, it's good to think about the range of different documentation needed and how long it will take to go through all of this documentation. So that's kind of the key of the first step of pricing. What documentation do you need? How long is it going to take you as an edge expert to go through this? Once you've gathered the documents, your next step is to model the building in the edge app. So identify whether the project meets the edge standard, identify the efficiencies that a client could take to improve the building performance, suggest 1 to 2 realistic alternatives for them to implement and improve the performance of the building, and then present the findings to your client. So this is where you as a design advisor comes into place. So when pricing the proposal for the gap analysis, you can split it into 3 clear phases. 1, document review. 2, edge modeling. And 3, client presentation. This will make it easier for the client to understand and easier for you to justify the pricing, taking into the account the time taken for each of those stages. So making sure the client understand what are the key deliverables that you are providing in this gap analysis service. Moving on from that, let's take a look at the typical scope of work for an edge expert. When gap analysis is not included, your core responsibilities include requesting and reviewing project documentation, modeling the building in the edge app, registering the project with a certifier, uploading evidence into the edge app, and then adding detailed comments to support each measure. You will also be responsible for responding to both auditor and certifier feedback. This is the baseline service that most clients will expect by hiring you as an edge expert. But each part involves time. So again, breaking these steps down into your proposal and pricing them accordingly is going to help clients understand the edge certification process better. Even if you're not doing a gap analysis, you'll still need most of the same documentation to complete the edge assessment. So again, this includes architectural, structural, MEP documents, plumbing specs, fuel and energy data use, and then information on your windows, your flooring, your smart meters, and your other sort of building elements. The time it takes to review, interpret, and organize all of this documentation should be factored into your proposal. And also remember, if you've already done a gap analysis, you may have 70 to 80% of the documentation already. So be sure to account for that overlap when planning your work. And also think about, if you're doing a gap analysis and an edge assessment for the client, quite often I'll see proposals where they've applied a discount for that. The edge expert has applied a discount for that. That is because they're already collecting 70 to 80% of the documentation. So it's kind of a good way to market both services. So when pricing your projects, key questions to think about are: what documentation is required for each asset? How long will it take you to complete the client comments for the documentation? And it's also important to consider the quality of the documentation received. So is there anything missing, or will you need to seek alternatives for that? That is sort of an additional layer of complexity that you'll need to factor into the proposal and your pricing as well. The next step is completing the edge assessment. Again, this makes up the bulk of the work as an edge expert. The key things to think about are: have you highlighted the key parts of each documentation to the auditor and review team? Sometimes we receive pages and pages of evidence from a client in terms of evidence. Less is really more here. Avoid overwhelming the auditor and make it really easy for them to verify compliance. This will save time as you go through the certification process. Is every measure in the Edge app supported by evidence and comments? And then finally, is the documentation readable and clear? If the evidence is unclear, the auditor or as a certifier will be sending it back for further clarification. So this will ultimately lead to delays for the client. If you do have queries regarding the Edge app and its measures and what sorts of evidence you should be using, first port of call is to check the Edge user guide, check that IFC guidance related to each measure. Second step is to contact your Edge auditor. Edge auditor cannot give design advice on what measures to help achieve the standard, but they can give advice on what evidence is sufficient in order to achieve the standard. And where the Edge auditor is struggling to find the answer as well, they can bring that question forward to us. And in the case where we don't know the answer as certifier, we will take that to IFD. Now, in the couple of slides before, I've showed the Edge certification scope of work within the process. However, many clients need support beyond certification. Edge expert work can and should be considered as a springboard into additional services. So does the client need help with aligning Edge with sustainability reports and ESG frameworks, supporting procurement of tech and materials? Do they need help costing out upgrades and efficiencies? Do they need project management or coordination with their wider design teams? By speaking to the client, identifying these needs earlier on, you can expand your role, increase the value of your service, and then also increase your own revenue. So Edge Expert should be used as a stepping stone to advertise the other services and also stand out amongst your competitors. So let's take a look at what are the elements of a project we need to think about in order to price our services. So we've had a look at the scope of work itself as an Edge expert. Now let's take a look at it from a project perspective. So I've written here, the price represents the effort and quality that we ensure. So the key thing to think about when pricing is to make sure we are pricing based on the relative effort to achieve the project results. So when you're having your initial conversations with clients, the key is to understand the project from within the Edge app. So let's make sure we have a basic understanding of the Edge project. An Edge project is defined as a building or group of buildings submitted for Edge certification with the same certification provider and same building owner. Project could be a couple of buildings at one location or many buildings spread across several locations. A sub-project refers to, on the other hand, the part of the project modeled individually in the Edge app. So the information contained within the sub-project section applies only to that portion being modeled on the file. I'll give an example. You've got 2 office buildings that make up an Edge project. Each office is a separate sub-project because each of those individual buildings is being modeled in those separate sub-projects. Why does this matter? Each sub-project needs to be modeled independently, including inputs, documentations, and comments. So the more sub-projects equals more effort and more time from your side as an Edge expert. So when talking to clients, we need to understand what would constitute a new Edge sub-project. This is important for you as Edge expert because you're doing that modeling. Many clients will not know how to calculate the number of Edge sub-projects, so it's important that we're asking the right questions to help them work it out. So things that would require a new sub-project would be a new building, new typology, new design, a new phase, how many certificates they're getting. And again, this is important for you when pricing your services to think about how many sub-projects are going to be created and supporting the client in doing that. But more than just thinking about the sub-projects themselves, what is the relative effort of each of your Edge sub-projects? I wanted to use the example of a resort here. because a resort can be modeled as one edge sub-project in the app, but there are loads of different components within this. So that could be villas, pools, restaurants, lounges, tennis courts, etc. All of these need to be modeled and evidence collected for each of these components. Warehouses, hospitals, or light industrial buildings are another example. These will often have more complex energy systems, mechanical components, and specialist spaces or tech. So even if it's just one edge sub-project, the effort involved may be more significant. On the flip side, say we had two office buildings that are similar in design, similar building materials, perhaps you're using sub-project multiplier, the relative effort of those two office sub-projects is going to be different from the relative effort of a different building type. So not all sub-projects are equal in terms of complexity, and that's why when you're talking to the clients, understanding the project and considering this when you're preparing your Edge Expert proposal is really key. With residential buildings, it's also really important to think about phasing. So phasing refers to when final reviews are submitted to the Edge app for certification submission. So in some cases, the whole development will be certified at preliminary in one Edge sub-project, but due to different construction timelines, there'll be multiple final submission phases. So for example, if you had 8 residential buildings, you've checked the Edge user guide on the grouping logic for residential buildings, and they can be combined into one Edge sub-project. You'd have one sub-project at preliminary certification. However, 4 of the buildings are being constructed and certified in 25 and 4 in 2027. This would indicate 2 construction phases, so 1 sub-project at preliminary and 2 at final. So thinking about the certificates, 1 at preliminary and 2 final certificates. As an Edge expert, this affects your scope of work, as all buildings will be modelled into 1 sub-project at preliminary and then later at the post-construction stage. This will implement the timelines as well as the services because you're doing that modelling at the later stage for the post-construction. Another key consideration is to think about who from the client team is going to support you with that documentation. Another factor that really affects the complexity of delivering a project is how smooth the communication is between you and the client. So making sure that there's a dedicated point of contact or a small team from the client side responsible for collecting and sending that documentation. If not, that work will fall to you, which will increase your time and your workload. So really key sort of takeaway from this is that clear communication between you and the client is going to reduce your effort. At preliminary stage, the key personnel involved from the client team will be different to the key personnel at post-construction. So at preliminary stage, this will be the architect team, civil MEP and structural teams, sustainability teams, and project managers. Whilst at post-construction, the team involved will be the construction team, procurement teams, site engineers, and the environmental and health and safety teams. So when talking to the clients and working that into your proposal, what's key to understand for the client is what will be required of them and how you will be working with each of the teams in order to collect the correct evidence and carry out the service. So the typical Edge client or some Edge clients will hire you into the role expecting the certification to be completed within a week and that they don't have to do anything. That's not the case. I would recommend to build in structured check-ins or progress meetings into your proposal. This adds value, keeps the project on track, and then helps avoid those bottlenecks. So being really clear with the client what is expected of them is going to be key in getting that project delivered at a high level. Some clients may expect you just to review the documentation they provide. But in other cases, they might go further and ask you to revise any drawings, generate missing evidence, or even create new materials. So when you're preparing that Edge Expert proposal, ask yourself, am I reviewing and advising? Or am I also producing evidence? If you're doing both, make sure the proposal reflects this added effort. Think about it as maybe like an add-on service and price that accordingly. Final thing to think about is timelines and budgets associated with the projects. So does the client have a strict deadline due to green finance initiatives or board compromises? How can you ensure that your proposal is clear in terms of its timelines to help clients achieve this deadline? Is the client's expectation also aligned with the consultant's audit and certification timeline? So I'll go through some of our timelines later on, but once you have a clear understanding of the project's complexity, aligning with the timelines is crucial. If you're unable to align with the timelines, it's important that the client understands why. So ensuring the clients have a clear understanding of the scope of work in relation to their timelines is also really important. Is there a dedicated budget for sustainability initiatives? So for example, if you're doing that gap analysis, if you need to make changes to the design, does the client actually have a budget to implement those changes? But more than that, is the design flexible or is it fixed? And then finally, is there any special requirement for Edge Advanced? So if the project is looking to achieve Edge Advanced, there may be more required of you as an Edge expert in order to implement those design changes or help the client to reach the standards. So that's a factor to consider within your Edge proposal as well. I'll be sending the slides over, but you can use this checkpoint as a basic list of what information you will need to get from the client in order to develop the Edge Expert proposal. You can see there's tons of questions here, and I think the key takeaway is that all of this requires communication with the client. But also remember that some of the information may not be available early on. That's okay. Be creative, be flexible, and adapt as needed. We are also here, IFC is also here to help and support you with any missing documentations or any clarifications that you need as well. In this final section then, thinking about everything we've discussed on understanding the project, understanding the scope of work, how do we put this together into the Edge Expert proposal? So this 1 to 6 are the key aspects to include within the proposal. First, your understanding of the project. What exactly is the scope of work for? Clients will want reassurance that you understand their project in relation to Edge. Secondly, a breakdown of the Edge Expert scope of work, clearly outlined with deliverables for each step. So I'm doing the Edge assessment. What is the deliverable? What is the output? So the client is understanding of what they're getting. What are those checkpoints? What is your working method, or what is your method of working with the team? So which of their personnel are involved, and are there regular scheduled check-ins with that team? On the flip side, who from your team will be involved? This will be key to making your proposal stand out. So whether you're working as an individual or within a team, making sure the client gets to know you and your experiences and your team is going to be an influential factor as to whether they want to continue the project with you. Your timelines and fees are also key to helping the client understand the project and how it will affect their own internal timelines. And then finally, what projects or relevant experiences do you have that shows your proficiency for the role? I would also recommend including an annex to your proposal with the full Edge certification service so that the client understands who is doing what. I've had a lot of experiences with clients that come to us and don't realize that there is an edge auditor involved, or that we aren't the edge auditor. So I think if you've got some basic information that you can just sort of copy and paste from certifier websites, will be helpful in helping the client understand the full certification process and how the work is split between the Edge Expert audit and certification parties. So that is an option to include that as well. Visual timelines are also really helpful for your proposal. So I've done an example of one here. This one breaks it down into each step. You can see I've got the month across the top and then the different deliverables across the side. So initial meetings, document collection, modeling in the Edge app, reviewing that, and then submitting for audit. So having something that's really clear and using visuals will help the client understand what's expected from them and how long each part takes. Also shows your professionalism and helps manage those expectations from the start. And again, I wanted to give an example of the full Edge certification timeline, including how long auditors and certifiers take. So as an example, after submission, most Edge auditors aim to provide feedback within 2 weeks, but review and final recommendation may take up to 4 weeks. If you're booking that site visit, that also may take longer to organise with the auditor. From our side as Edge certifier, once the project is submitted for review, we take 15 to 20 working days to issue that certification decision. And then if revisions are required, the review clock will reset. And again, this gives the client a realistic expectation of how long certification takes and allows you to explain where the delays might happen. Now, how to price your services. So at Sintali, we do not have a clear sort of bracket of how you should price your services. The aim of this session is to use sort of understanding everything you know about the scope of the work and the project and your efforts, pricing that correctly. IFC also does not have market regulation. However, there are a few examples from IFC's Magic Green Building Market Stakeholder Assessments. So what they did is they surveyed Edge Expert pricing for buildings of around 5,000 meters squared. And there's different, if you go onto the Edge user guide, I'll send the link across that I used after the session. They have sort of estimations of the Edge Expert costs across a number of different regions. These are guidelines, not fixed rules. So use them to sense check your pricing and make sure you're competitive. But remember that your pricing should reflect the value and the quality that you bring. So those of you that are in the Sintali Edge network, sometimes I will reach out to the network and ask for Edge Expert proposals and Edge Auditor proposals. In that case, Sintali will give feedback on whether your proposals are not competitive compared to the range that we received. But as a good first step, it might be worth taking a look at these guides if they are available in your area, and taking a look at what is a typical market range, but also speaking to those IFC representatives in each of your companies, because again, those IFC professionals will have sort of, they're speaking to the clients, they're speaking to a range of Edge experts, so that could be a good starting point as well for pricing your services. So to summarize the key elements then to consider when you're pricing your services, this would be the time. How long will each stage take based on the building complexity, based on the scope of work that you're undertaking? What level of support is needed from you versus from the client? Are there any add-ons that you will be providing, like gap analysis or procurement advice? And then what is your hourly or daily rate? I mean, fundamentally, if you have an hour or day rate, looking at the scope of work, how many hours is that going to take me? Times by your hourly rate, and that is going to be your edge certification, your edge expert pricing. So at a basic level, these are the things that we need to be thinking about in order to price your service. It's also highly likely that clients will be reaching out to multiple consultants or multiple companies to get an edge expert proposal. Your proposal will likely be the first impression that a company has with you. And if they are receiving many proposals, you need to make sure that your proposal is standing out. So I want you to think about who on your team is delivering the work, what are their relevant experiences? If you're new to Edge, what related skills or knowledge can you emphasize? E.g., do you have knowledge of local building codes? Do you have knowledge of sustainability design? Do you have knowledge of local construction practices? Do you have experience, maybe not of Edge, but of LEED, of BREEAM, of IGBC standard, of your local market standards? That shows that you're engaged in the green building market. I think for some of you as well, where there may not be too many edge experts in your local region, and perhaps the client will have to look for proposals, they're based in one country, but they will have to reach out to a lot of edge experts to get some proposals. If you're based in that country and you have that local market knowledge, you have language requirements, you can pay in local currency, you have that knowledge of construction practices, even if you're new to Edge, that will really be a factor that will help you be competitive compared to others that are putting in proposals. So yeah, so sort of don't be worried if you don't have loads of experience with Edge, but highlighting the experiences that you have is really helpful. This links on to USP. This stands for unique selling point. What is your unique selling point? So is that local presence, broader sustainability offering, or even exceptional communication? What can you bring to the client that may be different to others in the market? Or what are you highlighting in that proposal? Because everybody will be highlighting the Edge Expert scope of work because that is the service that you're offering. What are you highlighting that's different? Also consider how you structure your pricing. Some clients prefer like a modular proposal where they can pick and choose the services that they require based on the capacity within their own team. This flexibility could also win you the job as Edge Expert as well. So here are some typical examples of questions that Jose and I have had from clients as feedback when we have passed Edge Expert proposals to them. First question, why is there such a difference between pricing of different consultants? As I said, Edge is new to the market. Ball sort of figure of Edge Expert pricing is still variable in some regions, but this is where having a strong USP comes into play. So some of you might price based on square meters, some might price on sub-project or price based on property value. But when having your conversations, when including into the proposal, what is the information that you need to price? But perhaps what is more important in this case is including any relevant experience and company information. So if you are more experienced, it's expected that you will be charging a higher cost, but clients won't know this unless it is indicated in your Edge Expert proposal. Second, I touched on this just now. Can you split the fees up into sections? Clients will want to see the scope of work, I think, so they can understand the relative effort for each section. I've seen proposals that have like optional components, so clients can pick and choose. So I think this has been quite valuable as well in helping proposals stand out. Can I see the Edge Expert involved the CVs of the edge expert involved. Again, clients want reassurance, sometimes adding in the CVs as an annex to your proposal or including a meet the team section can be really helpful. And why can't I find the edge expert company website? A lot of clients, the first thing that they will do is Google your company. If you do not have a strong online presence, then that is not going to play in your favor. So if you've got a website, if you have got a LinkedIn page, showing your experiences across in an online presence in some way is going to help you getting those deals. And then finally, with another consultant, they said that my documentation would not be sufficient. Can I still certify? There's been quite a few examples that we've seen, particularly in really old buildings where not all of the documentation has been readily available. And we've had to work with the auditor and work with IFC and work with the edge expert consultant to find alternative documentations. Now, if an edge expert reviews the documentation and says, okay, well, you don't have this, this, and this, so we can't certify it, sorry. You can differentiate by being the consultant that says, okay, well, you're missing this, this, and this. I'm going to go away. I'm going to research what we can do. I'm going to take my service to the next step and find alternatives. And that will make you stand out as an edge expert consultant as well. So again, big topic here is communication, and communication with us in these circumstances can be really important. I've written on the screen, don't be afraid of having your first project. If you're new to Edge, don't be discouraged. You can still stand out even without prior Edge projects. Highlight those green building experiences, highlight any work with similar building types or your familiarity with local codes and construction practices, any training that you've done or any background in energy efficiency. And Edge, it is young as a standard, it's still growing, and many clients are new to it too. What matters most is that you can present a clear, confident approach, a clear, concise proposal, and back it up with what relevant experience you do have. Many of you will be at a starting point where you've not had your first project and you will have completed that Edge expert training. As an Edge expert, in those first projects, focus on the Edge app itself, and you can always subcontract those activities that you don't know to other organizations or sort of local Edge experts in the community. So working together could also be an effective tool here whilst you're still gaining skills. Okay, we're doing okay for time, so I'm going to pause for questions. I can see lots, so yeah. I think, yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Julia, we have many questions that actually is quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's about if we have pricing for reference for West Africa, Central Asia, and some other regions. I mean, for certificate consulting fees.
Yeah, so at Sintali, we don't have those pricing brackets. On the Edge website, that reference that I showed you, under the user documents, there is different, so if I show you back these graphs, this one here, this is taken from the Magic Green Building Market Stakeholder Assessments. I've used the example of Kenya, Mexico, and Philippines. There are other countries involved. I'm pretty sure West Africa is included on that. Use that as a starting point. Check those guides. Your next question, if there isn't one for your local area, speak to your local IFC support and get some more market information. But generally, there was quite a few regions on the Edge user guide. Jose, any thoughts on that from your side as well?
No, it's okay. Actually, I will encourage you if you have any particular question for your proposal. Perhaps you need something technical just to understand what your proposal is. Please contact us and we can help you with that. As Julia mentioned, we are a certification body. We don't have this kind of specific information, but we can help you through the process that you have. We have another question here, which is how to join Sintali network.
Yeah. So the Sintali network it consists of these webinars that we offer on a bi-monthly basis, access to our Edge forum, one-to-one support, and also access to a group chat for quotations. It is free to join if you are an Edge expert. I will send the link to sign up in the follow-up email from this webinar. So if you are not already involved and you would like to get involved and access more trainings like this for free, I'll send out the link.
Okay, perfect. So we have one hand rising from Bexo. Can you hear us?
I can let them speak. Hang on. There we go.
Okay.
Bexod, can you hear us? Or can you unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had one question. So with this payments, fees, registration, and just a clarification, the client has to pay themselves to the auditor, or I mean, this registration fee directly, or I can make some convenience, provide convenience for the client and cover myself this kind of, in order to avoid some delays, from their side.
Yeah, great question. So it will depend on the certifier. Us at Sintali, the Edge expert or the Edge auditor can pay the registration fee and pay the certification fee for the client's behalf. How this works basically is that the agreement types are slightly different between whether a client signs with us and pays directly, and whether that Edge expert takes that signature and payment role. It's essentially just there's an added section that says the client is happy for you as an Edge expert to sign on their behalf. Regarding currencies, and again, this will be a USP as an Edge expert, if you are able to take a local currency, sign the agreement, pay us on our behalf, that is going to be beneficial to you. So we take payment in US dollars, Great British pounds, and euros. The majority of projects is US dollars. So yes, you can take the payment in local currency as long as we receive it then in US dollars. So you can be the person that provides that for the client. I think in terms of supplier setup, it will reduce time and stuff like that. So yes, we can offer both methods for payment and contracting.
Okay, will it require some document or certification? I don't know, like no objection from the client to show that he's okay with this approach?
Yeah. So in that approach we send over, it's like a 1.5 page document that says that the client is happy for you to make that payment. Once we've received that, then we send the Edge certification agreement directly to you. And then once that's signed by yourself, we would send the invoice to you. So it's just a far shorter document that the client has to sign that says that they're happy for you to move forward with us signing and paying and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the main concern was that might take some, obstacle. There might be some obstacles for paying, or delays due to their internal procedure, how to make these payments. That's why I was asking if it was possible. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Julia, thank you so much. We have some other questions here, which is the Edge expert fee always lower than the certification cost, or it can be higher?
Difficult question. I would say in my experience, it's usually higher, because if we're thinking again about, let's go back to this timeline of what you're actually doing. Why is it going to be higher? Because this is all the work that you're doing. And then this is the role that the auditor and the certifier is doing. So from my experience, I would say that it's higher. Again, it depends on the market. But that would be my experience. Jose, I wonder if you want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. And it depends on the scope. As you mentioned before, sometimes the client, they don't need someone just to upload the documentation. They need someone to review the documentation they have. Perhaps they don't know if the drawings are okay for uploading or ready to upload to the HAP. So that will be more effort. So I encourage you to have all these kind of particular efforts that you will have in all your project. And for sure, as Julia mentioned, it might be similar to the certification cost, or normally it's a little bit higher than a certification fee. So we have another question here is how many H auditors do you have in Kenya? Can that information be available? So can you speak a little bit where, Julia, where to find this list of auditors that we have?
Yeah. So anyone that signs up to our network as an edge expert, or anyone that accredits as an auditor with us, is listed on our website under the Sintali directory. So if you have a look on our website, you can take a look. Again, I can send it over, the link to the directory, so you can see who's working in your area. And the reason why we have that on our website is that the clients can see that too, so that they can contact you to reach out to get services.
Perfect. We have another question here is, for the sake of budgeting at the outset, where can we find information regarding other costs in the process, such as auditor and certifier fees?
Yes. Okay. So certification fees are available on our website. We do also have, if you join the Edge Network, we did a session on our pricing last month or maybe the month before, so I can send you that recording. It's available on our website. What we can do as Edge Certifier is we can reach out to our Edge Auditor Network and ask for those quotations. If you have a project in mind, we can get those quotations so that we provide you with the price, we reach out to the network, we get a range of auditor costs, you can then take that to the client. On the flip side, you can use that directory to see who is working as an auditor in the region and reach out to them directly. So our pricing is publicly available on the website. The auditor, it will be dependent again on the market and the players that are working as auditors there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Julia. There is one question which says, how do you handle situations where clients keep changing the scope, like adding floors to a tower or adding a hotel to a tower?
My advice would be, firstly, make sure you have those conversations with the client on any changes that is likely to be made. So I put in one of the slide, is the design fixed or flexible? Is the design likely to be changed? Because I think we've all worked with clients before and things change all the time. I think that's where having sort of the add-on or modular approach in the pricing, making sure it's clear to the client that any changes that will impact the costing and the scope of work, and just sort of really having that clear and open communication, whether that's through conversation or within the proposal. We've had some cases in the past where, for example, at certification level, they have committed and signed a contract that said, so say it's a residential, and they've said that it will be submitted in one phase. They then come back to us and say, okay, well, actually, we're going to do it in 3 phases. So then we've done an addendum agreement and sort of priced out the additional phases. So that's an approach that you could take as well. Jose, any thoughts from you on that one?
Yes, and actually I will add there is to let the client know the scope and how the scope can change. I mean, how the price can change according to the scope. For example, from the certification body, if it is from Sintali, if your number of sub-projects change, the price is going to change. But for example, in the case you mentioned that your tower, so now you have an extra floor, but you haven't certified this project, your certification fee is going to remain the same. But your consulting fee perhaps is going to be a little bit more expensive because you need to review the documentation that you already have done this whole work. So, and I will tell you that as my experience, the communication with the client is completely key. Why? Because as mentioned by Julia, you are communicating not only with one person from the client. Sometimes you have to communicate with the design part, with the person who is in charge of the ESG metrics, and you have many people that you are chatting with, and sometimes there is miscommunication. So you have to find some communication channel from the client that will send all this documentation, or will collect all this documentation or information that you need from your project to make clear the information to the client and let them know that if there is another extra work, you need to charge for that extra work. So Julia, let's have another question. It says, oh, it's for me. This Jose, could you clarify who will sign the certification agreement? Is it only between the project owner and the certification body, or can an edge expert also be a party to this agreement? I will let you, Julia, to respond that question, please.
So there's two options, either between the project owner and the certifying body, or between the edge expert and the certifying body, depending on what the client prefers or what you as an edge expert can provide. So that was what I was talking about earlier. So we can let edge experts sign on behalf of the project owner, but the contract type just looks a little different. So essentially we can do both, but it depends on whether the project owner wants that and whether you are, as an edge expert, are happy to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia. We have here a last one, I would say. It says, are edge expert and auditor usually come from the same network? For example, if I am on Sintali list, could auditor must be also from Sintali, or could be from some other party, for example, Bureau Verita. Certifier is then who is told or Bureau Verita, who is in charge to appoint verifiers, expert, or clients, says.
Yeah, so edge expert and edge auditor can be the same company or separate companies. The edge auditor must be onboarded by the certifier. So that is why if you go to the GBCI website, they'll have their list of auditors. If you go to our website, the list of auditors will be slightly different. This is because IFC requires each certification provider to onboard and look after their own auditors. If you are not an auditor with Sintali, you can onboard with us. I can send over the link to sort of the requirements and the processes for that. So yeah, essentially there's a range of auditors. They're associated with different certification providers. With the certification provider, again, it's the client's choice. There are others in the markets. They'll have different ways to cost, different methods. It's your job really as an edge expert to collect that information on different costs for auditing, different costs for certification to help the client make those choices. But essentially, any client can work with any edge expert, any auditor, and any certifier. It's dependent on what will be best for their needs. And each auditor will have different timelines, different fees, the same with certification bodies. And then who is in charge to appoint those? Essentially, it's the client, but it could be you as an edge expert project managing connecting the dots and providing that additional service for the client as well.
Yes, and additionally, you can be an auditor, or you can appear in the auditor list from different certifiers. I mean, if you do the onboarding with Zintali, it doesn't mean that you cannot perform any audit from other certifier. I mean, you can appear in different lists, which is options that you will have as an auditor, because you can give different pricing for certification, because the certification entities will have different way how to price projects, so you can have different options.
Exactly. Well, it is 10 o'clock, so we will have to end the session there. There are loads of questions that we haven't been able to answer. I will go through those and email out the responses. I will also send out the slides and the recording and the other resources and links that I was talking about today. You can also reply to that email if you have further questions. I will likely be sending that out on Friday, latest Monday. So I'll send that across to you. Thank you all so much for your time, for listening, for engaging. It's really valuable to have you all here, and thanks to Jose as well for supporting me today. So have a lovely rest of your day, and hopefully we will all get to work together soon.
Thank you so much.